What was once a very small zoo, teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, has rapidly transformed into a shining light of a small community. Just because the locals are incredibly happy with Keystone Park and our views are as good as they've ever been, doesn't mean we can afford to take our foot off the gas for even a second. Luckily, our recently completed Reptile House is going to buy us a lot of valuable time to think about our next moves. The Reptile House outright doubled our species list at Keystone Park. We have a ton of variety inside this building. We also came up with an incredibly innovative way to make the Reptile House fresh every single day for guests. Let's show you what we came up with. The Reptile House is home to two habitats, the Cuvier's dwarf caiman, which is on the inside, and the spectacled caiman, which is outside. What's going to make this exciting, from now on, you're not going to know which species of caiman is where until you actually go inside of the Reptile House. This is because the two caiman enclosures aren't necessarily tied to a species anymore. They're for both caiman. And that's why the Cuvier's dwarf caiman enclosure you saw yesterday might have a completely different animal in it today. It's really innovative in the zoo industry. This also means that both caiman species effectively have double the space that they used to. This change also allows them to interact with different enrichment items, eat different foods, see different things, and in general allow them to live more exciting lives. Variety is just as important for animals as it is for people like you and me. Speaking of the people, guest feedback on this change has been incredibly positive. The Reptile House is our most popular attraction by far. Granted, it is our newest attraction, so this data could be skewed a little bit. Despite this fact, the animals are happy, the people are happy, we're making money, and there's room to improve. There's only one thing wrong with this for our two caiman species. I don't think their popularity is gonna last. Being such a new zoo, Keystone Park has had a lot of firsts happen recently, and today, sadly, we have to add another to the list. The North American beaver was one of the first animals added to Keystone Park, and the very first added to the wetlands section. They were indispensable in the zoo's success early on. Unfortunately, our female beaver, Willow, has had some health problems as of late. She's one of the oldest animals in Keystone Park relative to their maximum lifespan. She had been laid in the same spot for some time. Willow is one of the most iconic animals in Keystone Park, so a crowd of dedicated guests gathered around her, unsure of what was coming next. Miraculously, Willow got up. The guest's presence almost seemed to inspire her. She looked right at them, but unfortunately went right back down. She was able to get up one final time, before her newborn ruined the peace. Meet our newborn North American beaver, Bobby. He's the first ever animal to be born at Keystone Park. Bobby was a complete surprise to everyone involved. Since our vets had never encountered a pregnant animal at Keystone Park, we were unsure of what was wrong with Willow until Bobby appeared. We had prepared for the worst, but were met with the best. As for Bobby himself, he's incredibly adventurous. It took him no time at all to take his first dive into his pool. Typically in the wild, it takes a beaver anywhere from 1 to 3 days to take their first swim, and Bobby was completely aligned with this statistic. We still have some tests to run, but it appears that Bobby is 100% healthy. This has been such an incredible opportunity for all of our vets here at Keystone Park. This was bound to happen eventually, and now we're prepared for the next time it does. Our North American beaver enclosure has never been more popular. Despite all of this good news, there is one thing that I haven't told you yet. Willow actually had twins. Bobby has a brother. However, we only have enough room to take care of one of the beavers. Bobby's brother is being sent to Whispering Woods Wildlife Haven, a beautiful zoo run by my friend and fellow content creator, Sparrow. Whispering Woods has an absolutely stunning beaver enclosure, and we're incredibly proud to announce our partnership. Their veterinary staff is well more equipped than we are to handle the new addition. If you've visited Keystone Park and have enjoyed your stay before, I highly recommend giving Whispering Woods a visit as well. Don't forget to stop by their beaver enclosure when you do visit. I hope to see a lot of you there. I'm really excited. But let's get back to Keystone Park. If you were to come through the south side exit of the Reptile House and walk past the outdoor caiman enclosure, you're going to be greeted with a wide open construction site. But what is this? This is the start of our brand new section at Keystone Park, South America. Just like North America, we're going to have various different subsections of South America. This, along with the caiman enclosure from the last episode, is going to be known as the Amazon River. That probably gives away we're building for an aquatic species today. But what is it? This is an animal I've actually never encountered before, and I was shocked to find out that they were actually endangered with only about 5,000 in the wild. Meet the Giant Otter. It makes a lot of sense that a majority of their territory is where a majority of the Amazon River is located, right in the middle of South America. Due to their semi-aquatic nature, this is another species like the North American beaver that needs land, water requirement, and deep dive. These are very social animals, with a maximum group size of up to 15. They're also a lot larger than people realize. Males in particular can grow almost to 6 feet long and weigh up to 70 pounds. Keep in mind, these are also pack-hunting predators. Despite being cute, they can push even caiman out of their territory. Giant otter are also incredibly intelligent. We're gonna really have to handle them with care. Nothing on this page is sticking out to me too much, except for their diet. It looks like they're gonna eat primarily fish, which is very similar to our caiman. This is gonna take a big burden off of our keepers, since our caiman and otters appear to eat the same thing. It doesn't look like we're gonna deal with any cohabitation today. Let's start building. Keen-eyed and consistent viewers of the channel probably saw that large brick in the center of the path and know exactly what it's for. The first thing we're going to be building for this habitat is their deep dive pool, and luckily they only need about 2 meters deep of water. Not to spoil the ending of the video, but we end up putting 7 giant otters in here of varying genders, so we're going to make this a little bit bigger than it should be. Once I got the size of the pool about where I wanted it to be, I came in with the Add Terrain feature and made the sides a little bit smoother. After that was done, I then used the actual smoothing tool. Once the rough dimensions of the pool were done, we then had to put the glass around the side. All we're trying to do now is make sure the glass borders the perimeter of the path. It's important we do this now because this water is going to be the central focal point of the exhibit. It's going to be the main draw to it that every guest is going to notice immediately, so we have to make sure the water level is exactly where we want it before we continue and do anything else. I think the size is pretty good. This is going to be substantially larger than any other deep dive pool we have in Keystone Park so far, which is a good draw to the new exhibit. Of course, that only matters if the water actually works. And it looks like we got the level pretty much perfect on our first try, which is basically unheard of. So far so good. I'm thinking this exhibit is going to have 3 main focuses. One, the deep dive pool we already made. The second is where this path is going to be. This is going to be the main viewing area above the water. And third, we're actually going to be making a backstage that connects relatively close to our moose enclosure. We should start on that one. This is one of the blueprints that launched at the base game, created by Frontier themselves, and I think it looks pretty good. Although it's a bit small for our likings, we can do a really cool trick to expand it. By editing the blueprint and selecting every single piece that we want to copy over, we can effectively copy and paste the exact design of the facade of the building, leaving out details like the apple sign that represents the zookeeper hut. We can then duplicate over all of the things we copied and make the building really as big as we want. This is a backstage keeper hut, so we don't necessarily want this to look absolutely perfect. It's going to be relatively out of sight, but we still want it to look good and presentable. The habitat gate is going to be on the backside of the backstage. This is going to make it a little bit difficult right now for the keepers to get to the giant otter enclosure. However, once South America develops, I'm confident we'll find a better route. This is the scale of the building we're working with currently, and I think it looks pretty good size-wise. To get the remaining walls done, all you have to do is do the exact same copy and paste trick we used to get the size of the building down, so let's skip to the interior. Before we work on the interior, I made one of the doors substantially smaller than the other. Take a wild guess which one's for the otters and which one's for the keeper. Now starting on the interior, first I wanted to get the floor done. We're going to be using a basic limestone texture, relatively similar to the color of gray we used for the walls. You want the floor of a backstage to look a little bit beat up and rugged, so limestone is going to be perfect. I took the same limestone texture and made a little ramp for both the otters and the keepers to make it easier to get in and out of the backstage. It's definitely quite small in here, but I like the space. We're gonna have to get creative with how we use it. I'm thinking the otters will be on the right and the keeper stuff is on the left. To divide the two sections, I brought over the backstage piece I already made for the raccoon enclosure. This is where their food tray is gonna be. Our keeper won't have to walk very far to stock it. It's really convenient. I also decided to throw some of their bedding around here too. The keepers are gonna get an absolutely perfect view of the otters and tell just how many they have to prepare food for. In summary, really easy backstage trick. From start to finish, I'd say it probably took me about an hour, and that's not bad at all. Now that the backstage is officially complete, we need to start working on the basic shaping and framing of the underwater section. To do this, we're going to line the walls that are already made of dirt with some basic wood. When building the path, I was sure to make the width of it 4 meters wide. This was because I knew we were going to come on the grid for this step of the build, and these Arctic wood walls are also 4 meters wide, so it was really easy to make everything line up and be geometrically perfect. A little bit of planning ahead goes a long way. Eventually we were left with this shape, and I say eventually because it took a lot longer than I thought it would, because I eventually came into some plaster blocks and made the path look a lot nicer on the bottom, including the stairs. We're not going to go over how to do it in this video, but I got the plaster in the floor to get right up to the glass. If you want a better look on how to do that, check out the Beaver episode. Now that we have the basic structure and the shaping of it done, we need to start working on the outside and detailing it up. Since the outdoor caiman enclosure and the giant otter enclosure are both part of the same area, that being the Amazon River, we're going to be using a very similar technique using the same shade of color of faux rock. Let's start building. The first step I always take when using rocks is make a retaining wall keeping back the dirt. You have to remember that the rocks can also break through any surface that you're building with. If that happens, just use the advanced movement menu and get them out of there. I didn't necessarily want this underwater portion to look like a cave. We have plenty of rocks on the outside, but we're going to do a little bit more of the Arctic wood on the inside. This was a bit of a last minute design change, and I'm glad I caught it early on, because this would have been a nightmare to fix in about 20 minutes. After all of the wood was in place, I decided to add a lot more details of the rocks. Some rocks are really good for structure, and others are incredible for detail. By messing with the y-axis of these faux rocks in particular, you can get some really intricate details. Just make sure you have random rotation on, and mess with the height a lot. Small rocks like this add texture to your build. You don't want your build just to look like a giant boulder in the middle of your zoo. You want it to look like an actual mountain. If you really want to level up your habitat design, adding in these small details is an absolute must. As for this habitat, right now I'm a little bit lost. I don't really know where I want to go with this. I'm thinking now we need to map out the actual barrier of the habitat to get an idea of just how big we want to make this thing. I think we should start on the side closest to the rocks we've just been working with. This will make things easier. In the last episode, we designed this fence to stop the caimans from escaping the exhibit by rocketing out of the water. They're incredibly strong swimmers, and so are these otters, so we're going to be employing the exact same fence design over here so they don't escape. I wanted to make this fence really strong, so I placed a segment every 2 meters using the Move Snap menu. I also made it a fair bit taller than it was before. Otters aren't necessarily great climbers, but they will find a way to escape. They're incredibly cunning and intelligent animals. Installing the mesh was actually really easy. Since we evenly spaced everything so well, it was as simple as just finding the 2-meter long mesh. Just make sure you have random rotation off. Once we had the design of the mesh figured out and it was all lined up, it was as simple as using the exact same Move Snap menu and just lining it up with the poles. Making this barrier has definitely gotten my mind on track of the exhibit, and I know exactly where we want to go now. I'm thinking now we should do the rest of the barrier and completely outline the exhibit. To start with the rest of the outline, I want to line the path, and to do this, I want to make South America a little bit unique among Keystone Park. We're going to be using these faux rocks to line the entire path, not really adding a curb. It's going to make it a lot more immersive since the plants are basically going to be within touch. We're also going to be making a secondary rock structure next to the viewing platform. The viewing platform itself actually kind of has a funny origin. Originally I was just planning the outside of the exhibit and kind of threw it together as a placeholder, but I ended up liking it so much, we actually kept it through every single draft of the habitat. This is really uncommon for me, but I really do like the look of it. We're going to be adding a lot more wood later on, especially when the South America pack comes out, so this isn't going to look as out of place come next week. Until we get to the point where we can actually start working with the viewing platform, we're going to be using various faux rocks and building up this next rock structure. We're using pretty much the exact same techniques that we've been using the entire video while working with the rocks. This is nothing new. We're just making it a little bit bigger. I decided to add the smaller faux rocks to the top and the sides of the rock structure. I really liked how it looked in the end, and I'm going to go back to the other rocks and do this exact same thing. I also added a really small window into the rocks, so I went into Explore mode just to make sure it was at eye level, and it was. After that side of the habitat was 100% complete, the only side left to link up was the backstage to the main rock structure. This was really easy to do. Once all of the foliage is in place, this really isn't going to be seen whatsoever by the general public, so I figured a simple chain link fence from the barrier tab would suffice. The only difficult part of this was linking up this new chain link fence to the rock structure, because we didn't really have a rock structure going in this direction. To get around this problem and save a lot of time, I copy and pasted over a small segment of the mountain that we've already made and messed around with the Y coordinate to get a lot of different looks. Even though it certainly wasn't easy, we finally closed up the habitat, and I think it looks really nice. We just have to add a lot of foliage in here now, and this is certainly going to be a time-consuming process. But before we do that, I think we need to throw a roof on the underwater viewing. It looks a bit bare. While the exterior of the habitat took me a significant amount of time to design, I had the idea for the roof of this enclosure from the very start. We're going to be making this an island of sort, but the island isn't going to be accessible to the Giant Otter. We're going to be making it a little bit above the surface of the water. The way we're going to do this is by using flat faux rocks with random rotation on. These are going to hang over the sides of the exhibit, not allowing the otters to jump out of the water and get up. We're going to be detailing this up with a lot more foliage later on. This is just a base layer, so it looks good from actually inside of the underwater viewing platform. After the rocks were in place, I then came in with these new conservation pack pieces. I've never used them before, but I actually really like the look. The grass is really lush and vibrant, which contrasts from some of the pieces that we previously had in the game. The conservation pack is a must-buy in my opinion. To make them look less like Minecraft grass blocks, I came in with some circular mulch patches and sunk them down enough to make a really interesting pattern. Of course, afterwards, we had to use these smaller faux rocks to blend everything in together. I really can't say how important these are to building. They come from the aquatic pack, and in my opinion are probably the single best detailing piece in the entire game that's not called buffalo grass. This is a perfect plot of land for some really detailed foliage. I can't wait to see what we can do. Before we start that, I want to finalize the viewing platform, and to do that, we have to work a little bit below the surface. These details are really easy to do, but incredibly necessary. The first thing I wanted to accomplish was get rid of the ugly glass barrier connection and replace it with the nice fence that we made. After that was done, I went back below the surface and fixed any imperfection of some more faux rocks, these ones colored a bit darker. This is going to be a fun foliage section. This is effectively going to be getting our plant palette down for the entirety of South America. I started off South America with an African oil palm. Doesn't really make sense, but I thought it looked nice right here. I then turned my attention to the island that we just made, placing a bunch more palm trees all around, making sure that they don't peek through the floor. If placing plants ever feels a little bit stale, try to angle them at 15 degrees. It really makes them look a lot nicer. One of the more important foliage settings is called Align to Surface of Water, and if you have this turned on, it's going to automatically snap any plant to the surface of the water. Not just water lilies, but absolutely anything. This is really important when building for water lilies though, as this is where they're naturally found. Just remember to turn the setting off afterwards, because you don't want every plant to be aligned to the surface of the water, just the ones that actually belong there. Usually I'm not the biggest fan of these scaevola bushes, because they're really big and tend to be a little bit awkward to work with, but I actually really like them as the groundwork of this island. Since no animals are going to be up here, the visibility of the plant doesn't matter. Matter of fact, since it's so big and obstructive, it actually works in our favor, making you see less and less of the actual island itself. Now that we placed enough foliage to get a really good understanding of how this exhibit is going to be laid out plant-wise, I figured it was time to come in with the terrain. The terrain in this enclosure is relatively standard. Around the water, we've got sand, two varying types, fine and coarse, and outside of the sand, we have some short grass. We're going to cover that up with more plants later. Now that a majority of the plants have already been placed in the exhibit, we have to come in with some smaller details and varying textures. These bracken plants, along with some bramble bushes on the rocks, are going to do a great job of this. We used this technique of the bramble bushes and the faux rocks a lot in the Reptile House, and I liked how it looked. I want to incorporate a lot of these palm trees into South America. This will give it a very good contrast from North America and the rest of Keystone Park. When detailing foliage, it's incredibly important to remember all sightlines of the exhibit. Remember, we have a giant underwater viewing portion in here, so we can't just let the underwater go undetailed. I really like the look of this tick seed from the conservation pack. I'm surprised to learn that it's actually native to South America, so it's going to fit perfectly. This definitely looks a lot better than it did before. I'm quite happy with it so far. We still have plenty of details to add, and it's nowhere near complete yet, but this is definitely a step in the right direction. All of the different types of foliage made this a lot more engaging to build than anything in North America we've built for so far. While the inside of the exhibit is nearing completion, the exterior still has a few more key details I really want to add. The first thing I wanted to implement were these bronze statues from the aquatic pack. This is a really rocky and mountainous terrain on the exterior, so there's not really a good spot for a sign saying specifically what animal's in here. These statues are going to tell people. This exhibit also didn't have a name, so I decided to call it Below the Surface. For obvious reasons, look where we are. I then added in some basic education facilities, such as a habitat education board, and a few of the interactable ones. And I just kicked my power cord. The screen didn't cut to black, by the way. This is the recording. Luckily, we only lost about 15 minutes of progress, which isn't much in the grand scheme of things. It could have been a lot worse. After redoing the details that we just added in the underwater section, I then added a few more rocks to the base of the pond, and then we were done. Now this is how you start off a section of a zoo. Welcome to the Amazon River. This is our first official section of South America, and I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. We still have a long way to go with a lot of the other exhibits and the surrounding area, but this is one heck of a start. I'm really happy with how this exhibit turned out so far. We use such a wide variety of plant species in here, a really good contrast to the North America section. That doesn't mean I'm not proud of North America at all. I still think it's some of my best work ever, but it is more of a starter type area. It has a lot of basic techniques. Now the zoo is further along and actually making a profit, so we can really do some grand projects and really expand our reach. Keystone Park is just getting started, and South America is going to be a great leap forward. I actually didn't detail up the underwater viewing too much. This is because I want to wait until the South America pack officially comes out. There's a few things in there I really want to decorate with down here, and I'm gonna wait. One of the best looking views is actually the most simple. We used a really nice Indian piece of fabric and recolored it gray like we did in the Cayman enclosure. We used a tree to hang it up. I also slightly polished the outside of the backstage rooms. It's a minor aspect, but happy with how it turned out regardless. This exhibit actually turned out to be one of the bigger ones in Keystone Park so far. It has an impressive footprint in our lineup. We started off South America incredibly well with this otter enclosure and the outdoor caiman, but let's actually get the otters in there. They've been in processing long enough, and I think they're ready. Meet Keystone Park's newest addition to the zoo. Everyone give a warm welcome to the Giant Otter. These animals are incredibly curious. We had to pack their exhibit tight with enrichment items so they didn't get bored. Of course, the most important enrichment is their social group. We have 7 of them in here. You get great views of the otters all over the exhibit, but they certainly like their underwater viewing the most. For being such big and carnivorous animals, they're actually surprisingly graceful underwater. They're incredibly excellent swimmers. The underwater viewing very well might be the most popular section at Keystone Park. These guys are really entertaining to watch. With 7 very social otters, it's going to be impossible to be bored. I was really excited for the South America pack before building for the Giant Otter, but after building for the Giant Otter, I can't wait for January 29th. The Giant Otter quickly became one of my favorite animals to build for in Planet Zoo. Their animations are amazing. They also adjusted to their habitat surprisingly fast. Normally it takes at least a few days for the animals to get comfortable, but I guess since there's so many of them here, they got used to each other before the habitat. I'm incredibly excited for this section of Keystone Park to open up to the public. It's gonna take a while, we still have a lot of work to do, and half of the animals don't exist in Planet Zoo console yet. It's gonna be really fun once they do though, and I can't wait to make more content on it as soon as it drops. I think that's gonna be it for today's video, unfortunately. I have to get to work designing the next enclosure, because it's gonna be a good one. If you did enjoy today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also leave comments suggesting names for our 7 giant otters. We have a bunch of them. Let me know what animals you want to see in Keystone Park. I'd love to hear your opinion. That being said, I think it's going to be it for today's video. Kingpin out. See you in the next one.